Welcome into another video, this time Thursday Night Football. We're talking about the Seahawks taking on the Cowboys, and there are some nice fantasy appeal type of players that I want to go into it. Can't wait to dive in. Let's get to it. Let's take a look at the fantasy players to watch in this game. First, on the Seahawks side, the top fantasy players, in my opinion, are quarterback Geno Smith, wide receiver DK Metcalf, and wide receiver Tyler Lockett. For starters, let's talk about Geno Smith. Now, Smith has had a complete 360 really from last season. I mean, he isn't really producing like he was, and fantasy owners are paying the price for drafting him so early. Thus far this season, Smith has only eclipsed the 300-yard mark 3 times, and this week against the Cowboys is no easy task. As Geno Smith is running for his life, he will be trying to look downfield and connecting with his elite targets at the wide receiver position. If the offensive line can give Geno enough time just to find his weapons, then you could probably see Smith end up with a solid stat line. But the Seahawks will be playing from behind all game, so there should be plenty of opportunities to go around to find some fantasy points. Now let's move it on along to DK Metcalf. Metcalf is clearly the alpha dog in this wide receiver room. He should see a healthy amount of targets this week as the Seahawks try to keep their heads above water. I see a lot of double teams coming DK's way, but if he can find those open spots, I do like DK the most this week from any of the Seahawks trio of wide receivers. Next, we're talking about Tyler Lockett. Lockett is a guy that I would say needs to beat this defense deep in order to be fantasy relevant. So the dink and dunk game doesn't really work for fantasy owners when you talk about Lockett. So the Cowboys defense is stout and they won't be letting Lockett beat them underneath. You always need to start Lockett just because of his ability to boom in any given game. I would say start Lockett this week and just pray that he can catch one of those 40+ yard bombs. Now let's go ahead and switch on gears, move over to the Cowboys. The top fantasy players for this team, in my opinion, are quarterback Dak Prescott, running back Tony Pollard, CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver Brandon Cooks, and Jake Ferguson at that tight end position. First, we're going to talk about Dak Prescott. Prescott is looking to really expand on his boom game that he had last week, where we saw him put up 331 yards and 4 touchdowns. The Seahawks defense is far from scary, and I can see Prescott really easily being able to put up some solid numbers yet again. The Cowboys are a pure pass-first type of offense, and Prescott is benefiting from the sheer volume of passes that he's attempting, along with all the weapons that he does have. So Prescott, he's a pretty much easy set it and forget it type of quarterback this week. I really do like him. So next, let's go ahead and move on along to Tony Pollard. Pollard will be thrown into a positive game script and will be able to have quite a few opportunities against this defense. Pollard hasn't been receiving the 20+ carries a game that we were all hoping for during this offseason, but there are games that we can see him be very, very productive with the carries he does receive. This could be one of those games. So the Cowboys are a pass-first type of offense, and that leaves Pollard on the outside looking in for quite a few of those matchups. This is a matchup to where I can see production coming for Pollard. Start Pollard with confidence. Now let's go ahead and move on to CeeDee Lamb. Lamb has cooled off from his hot start to begin the season, but the Seahawks could just be what the doctor ordered. Lamb is still the clear #1 wide receiver in this room, and I can see, for him to really look to reinsert himself into dominance. He wants to be in a nice category, and he could probably just start that this week if he's dominant like I think he can be. So look for Lamb to have one of his ceiling type of games this week against this Seahawks secondary. Moving along to the Brandon Cooks. Now, Cook's been playing quite well lately. He's catching some nice chunk yardage and chunk plays. So the Seahawks defense sets him up for yet another great performance this week if he can continue getting things going. He's still being targeted the second most on the team, and while he's still clearly behind Lamb in the pecking order, he has made up for it by those big plays that he can do. So fantasy owners are getting a glimpse of what it was really like to have Cooks in his prime as of late, and we can only hope that this trend really continues for Cooks. Cooks is a start for me this week. Last but not least, for the fantasy players that I'm watching in this week on Thursday Night Football is Jake Ferguson. Ferguson has started to become a boom or bust type of tight end for me. So he has really good fantasy stats when he scores a touchdown, but if he can't find the end zone, you normally see something like 1 catch for 30 yards at the end as his whole end total. So it's really frustrating to be rostering Ferguson because he can give you a stellar performance or a big steaming pile of poop. So this week he does have a good chance to find the end zone, so he definitely is a start for me. Just like there's players that I would start in this game, there's also some players that I could see that you could put in there as sleepers if you're in a pinch or need somebody for a flex spot. For the Seahawks, I could see Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet being fantasy viable this week in the right circumstance. Kenneth Walker still isn't practicing as the recording of this video, but head coach Pete Carroll did say that the team is hopeful that Walker can play Thursday even if he doesn't get much on the field work this week. With that being said, the Cowboys defense plays the run extremely well. So even if it's a split workload or even a full workload on either side, whether it's Walker or Charbonnet, I just don't see enough fantasy points here to suggest either is a must start type of player, no matter the situation at hand. Now for the Cowboys, I can see Jalen Tolbert having some deep fantasy flex appeal this week. So Tolbert's been receiving, a handful of targets for the past few weeks. So if you're in a pinch due to some injuries or a much needed, bye week for some of your players, you need to kind of throw a dart throw somewhere. I think from the Cowboys, you could do it. And Tolbert would be the one that I would suggest to you. So he isn't an exciting play by any means, but like I said, just a dart throw if you need it. At the end of the day, anybody can go off and become a fantasy asset, but it's up to you to ultimately decide who to put into your lineup. Guys, we're putting out videos each and every week to help you make the best decisions possible so you can eventually hold up that championship. Make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. Hit the like button for me. It really, really helps out the channel. And leave a comment down below. Let's go back and forth. If you have questions or comments, let me know. Can't wait to see you guys on the next video. We'll see you guys next time.